Hey everyone, ready for a deep dive into the lean startup? We're going to unlock the secrets of building successful businesses in a world full of uncertainty. And the best part, these principles, they aren't just for Silicon Valley, the tech giants. They're for everyone, no matter what you're working on.
That's right. This lean startup method, it's really all about adapting. It's like a toolbox packed with tools you can use if you're creating something new. Doesn't matter if it's a product, if you're leading a team, or even if you just want to be more, innovative in your own work.
So like, it throws the whole traditional business plan idea out the window?
Exactly. Instead of clinging to those, rigid predictions, which are kind of pointless in a world that's constantly changing, the lean startup is all about, embracing uncertainty and adapting as you go. It's like roll with the punches.
Makes sense. So no more detailed 5-year projections.
Not quite. But you got to understand, entrepreneurs, they're not just in those flashy startups, they're everywhere. You can find that entrepreneurial spirit even in big companies, driving innovation from within. It's pretty cool.
That reminds me of something I read about Intuit, the company behind TurboTax. They're huge,
Yeah.
but they basically turned themselves into this like 7,000 person lean startup. Wild, right?
Oh, yeah. Their story is incredible. Back in 2002, they were really struggling with developing new products. They were a well-managed company, don't get me wrong. But too many of their new products were failing, just flopping. And their founder, he realized their old school approach just wasn't cutting it anymore. Not for innovation, at least.
Okay, so what did they do? Did they just like ditch all the rules and wing it?
Not exactly, but they definitely made a big change. They started empowering their teams to run tons of experiments, hundreds each year. They created this whole system for rapid testing and learning.
So let's talk more action.
Yeah, pretty much. So, for example, let's say they were developing a new feature for TurboTax Online. They'd actually build two versions of it, right? Two totally different versions. Then they'd randomly assign users to each one and see which one performed better.
Oh,
Clever. Yeah.
yeah.
And based on all that data, they could finally make an informed decision about which version to, roll out to everyone.
Wow. That's way better than like spending years developing something that nobody ends up wanting. It seems like with this whole lean startup thing, it's all about actually getting out there and testing your assumptions with real customers
Yeah.
and doing it fast.
You got it. And that's where validated learning comes in. It's not about those traditional measures of progress, like sticking to some rigid plan. It's about learning milestones. So instead of asking, are we on schedule? You're asking, what have we learned about our customers? And how can we use that to, build a better product?
So it's about embracing the build, measure, learn
Yeah.
loop, right? But how does that like actually work? It can't be as simple as just, throwing something together and seeing if it sticks.
Well, it's definitely not about being reckless or anything, but it is about being open to experimenting and iterating quickly. Think of it like A/B testing. You create two versions of something, maybe an ad campaign, and then you see which one does better. You're not just guessing, you're gathering data and using it to make smarter decisions.
Right, right. So where does the minimum viable product, the MVP, fit into all of this?
Good question. The minimum viable product is the simplest thing you can build to, get through that build, measure, learn loop quickly. You're not aiming for perfection here. You're building something you can get in front of customers fast so you can start gathering that feedback and iterating.
Hmm. So it's like a prototype, right?
Mm.
But isn't there a risk of turning off potential customers if it's not like polished?
It's a balance for sure. But sometimes a lower quality MVP can actually be more effective for getting valuable feedback. Yeah. Take Groupon, for instance. They started with handmade PDFs and a simple blog. That's it. And look at them now. Massive success story.
So you're saying it's better to launch something rough around the edges than wait till it's perfect?
In many cases, yes. The goal is to get something out there in front of your customers
Oh.
ASAP. You can refine and improve as you go.
So the MVP, it's like a learning tool in itself.
Absolutely. It lets you test those riskiest assumptions, right? And avoid wasting time building things that customers don't actually care about. This actually leads us to another key lean startup principle: innovation accounting. The thing is, traditional accounting, It often fails in the startup world. It relies on predictions that are often way off in those super uncertain environments. So instead of focusing on like those traditional financial metrics, profit and loss, the lean startup, it like emphasizes tracking what they call actionable metrics. So you're getting insights into like customer behavior, how the product is actually performing, real stuff.
So we're not just looking at like the money coming in, money going out. We're actually looking at how people are using our product, right? Like what are they clicking on? Where are they, I don't know, getting stuck?
Exactly. It's like you could have a product with tons of downloads, right? But if nobody's using it, those downloads don't really mean anything. It's just a vanity metric.
Yeah, vanity metrics. Every marketer's worst nightmare. But how do we know which metrics are actually, actionable, the ones that matter?
That's where that build, measure, learn loop comes back in. You have to figure out the key metrics that align with your business goals, and then you got to track those metrics like crazy as you're iterating, making changes to your product. That data, it'll help you decide, whether to pivot or persevere.
Pivot or persevere. That sounds intense. Like a turning point for any startup.
Oh, it can be. Pivoting, that means changing course based on, what you've learned from your experiments. It could mean changing your product, the market you're targeting, or even your whole business model.
Whoa. And persevering, that's like sticking with it, right? Even when things get tough. But how do you know when to pivot and when to persevere? Seems like a tricky decision.
It is. There's no magic formula. It takes, really analyzing your data, understanding your customers, and honestly, just being ready to make those tough decisions. A good example is Grocket, the online test prep company. They were growing pretty steadily in the beginning, but then it just plateaued.
So they were at a crossroads, right?
N-
Pivot or persevere, which way did they go?
Well, they did this thing called split testing, to figure out why their growth had stalled. They compared like different versions of their product and marketing materials. What they found out was the problem wasn't the product itself. It was how they were positioning it, how they were talking about it. So they decided to pivot their marketing, to try and reach a wider audience.
So they kept the product, but changed how they reached their customers. That's pretty interesting. Shows how important it is to be flexible and willing to adapt.
For sure. And that adaptability, it's a key principle of the lean startup. Another super important thing to understand is the different, what they call engines of growth. These are the things that can like really fuel your business. The lean startup identifies four main ones: sticky, viral, paid, and repeat purchase use.
Okay, break those down for me. What do those engines actually mean?
So sticky growth, that's about keeping your users engaged and coming back for more. Think of like a social media platform, one that keeps users hooked with all its features and content. What matters here is the retention rate. That's the percentage of users who, stick around, keep using your product over time.
So that creates something people just can't get enough of.
Right.
What about viral growth? That seems like the dream for a lot of startups these days.
Oh, it can be super powerful,
Hmm.
but it's definitely not easy to pull off. Viral growth, it's when your product spreads like wildfire. Think Facebook, TikTok, anything that gets people to invite their friends.
Yeah. It's like one person tells two people, those two people tell four people, and it just keeps going. But I guess not every product can, like, go viral, right? What about those other engines?
So paid growth, that's relying on advertising, or other ways to attract customers, but you're paying for it. It can get you a big audience fast, but you got to keep a close eye on your numbers, make sure you're not spending more than you're making.
So your cost per acquisition has to be lower than your customer lifetime value. Makes sense. What about that last one? Repeat purchase use.
That one's super important for businesses that depend on recurring revenue, like subscription services, consumer goods, that kind of thing. It's all about getting customers to come back for more, whether it's through subscriptions, repeat purchases, or just like ongoing engagement.
Gotcha. Building loyalty, creating a product that people stick with. Sounds like there's a lot to think about when choosing the right engine of growth for your business.
And that's why the lean startup stresses focusing on just mastering one engine, at least in the beginning. Trying to do too much at once can really backfire in those early stages.
So find the engine that works best for your product, your market, your whole business model, and then go all in on that one.
Exactly. And as your company grows, you got to be ready to, adapt and evolve your approach.
Speaking of adaptation, the lean startup talks a lot about small batches.
Yeah.
Can you explain what that means? Like, how does it apply to startups?
This idea actually comes from lean manufacturing,
Yeah.
specifically Toyota. They're famous for their efficiency. It's about breaking down those big, scary tasks into smaller, more manageable chunks, and then iterating on those chunks quickly.
So you're not trying to build this like perfect product all at once. You're building it piece by piece,
Yeah.
right? Testing and refining each step of the way.
Exactly. This way, you can catch quality problems early on and adapt quickly. Think of it like Toyota's and Simon cord. Any worker on the line can pull it if they see a defect, and the whole production line stops.
Whoa, really? That sounds kind of counterintuitive, doesn't it? Like stopping the assembly line would slow things down, wouldn't it?
Well, yeah, it might seem that way, but finding and fixing those problems early is actually way more efficient in the long run. It's like saving yourself a major headache later. A great example of this is Alphabet Energy. They're a clean tech startup. They use small batches to test, their assumptions about the market before they invest in huge, expensive production runs. Which makes sense. Energy production is super capital intensive.
Yeah, I can imagine. So they're minimizing their risk by testing things out in these smaller, more manageable steps. That's smart.
It really is, and it just shows how important continuous learning and adaptation are. Another key part of building a successful lean startup is like understanding the root cause of your problems.
And that's where the 5 whys comes in, right? Keep asking why until you get to the bottom of things.
That's it. And the interesting thing is, a lot of times the root cause of a problem, it's human, not technical. The book gives this example, a hypothetical one from IMVU. They had a server failure, it seems like a tech issue, right? But when they traced it back, it turned out it was because the engineers weren't trained properly.
Whoa. So it's about looking deeper.
Right.
Figuring out the underlying systemic factors that are at play.
Exactly. And that technique, it can be used for any problem, not just technical ones.
I like it. So how do we build what the book calls an adaptive organization? A company that really embraces that whole continuous learning and improvement thing.
Yeah. And building that kind of culture, it can be tough, especially in big companies that are stuck in their ways. How do you get people to change their mindset and embrace this new way of working?
It's not easy, that's for sure. It takes strong leadership, a willingness to, try new things, and a real commitment to transparency. The book actually uses Intuit as an example again. When they were making that shift to a leaner, more agile approach, they had to invest in new tech, change their processes, and really create a culture that was open to experimentation.
It sounds like a massive culture change.
Oh, it was. And it wasn't always easy, but it worked out in the end. They moved away from that large batch development where teams would be working in silos for months at a time.
Yeah.
And they switched to these smaller, more iterative cycles so they could get feedback faster, find those problems early on, and adapt way more quickly.
It's amazing how these ideas from making cars, lean manufacturing, can be applied to building software, even to running a whole company. That's the beauty of it. These principles, they're adaptable. You can use them in any industry, any situation.
So speak about challenging the status quo.
Yeah.
Right? Embracing experimentation and building that culture of continuous learning and improvement. It makes you think about how, we all approach work. Maybe we should all be asking ourselves, what assumptions am I making? And then how can I, test those assumptions, but more effectively?
That's a really great point. That's a big takeaway from the lean startup. It's not just about, building a business. It's about changing your mindset, how you approach problems and finding solutions in a way that's more iterative and data-driven.
And that brings us to Frederick Winslow Taylor, right? And that whole scientific management thing. It was all about efficiency. But sometimes it felt like it was at the expense of, the human element.
Yeah, that's something to really think about. The lean startup, it shouldn't be about squeezing every bit of productivity out of people. It should be about giving them the power to learn, to experiment, and to really contribute to a shared vision.
So it's finding that balance between efficiency and, people's well-being, putting the system first, but not forgetting about the individuals who are actually in that system.
Right. And the lean startup actually ends with some pretty interesting ideas about the future of entrepreneurship. The author, he imagines these startup testing labs, and they would, really rigorously test out different methods for developing products, almost like a scientific research lab, but for startups.
I love that idea. It's taking the guesswork out of innovation. It puts data-driven decisions front and center. What else does he talk about?
He also talks about a long-term stock exchange, right? So it would support companies that are focused on sustainable long-term innovation, not just chasing those quick profits.
That's a really bold idea. It really challenges the traditional ways we measure success in business. And it makes you think about what we value as a society.
It does, and it fits perfectly with those core lean startup principles. It's not just about building businesses, it's about building something that matters, something that creates value, for the company and the world.
So what does all this mean for you, our listener? Whether you're launching a product, leading a team, or just trying to be more innovative in your work, the Lean Startup gives you this powerful framework for navigating uncertainty and achieving success.
It's about questioning your assumptions, testing your ideas really thoroughly, and being willing to, pivot when the data tells you to. The most valuable thing in a startup, it's not the product itself, it's all the learning you get along the way.
It's seeing failure as a chance to learn, not a sign of defeat. It's all about experimenting, iterating, adapting.
And as we wrap up our deep dive into the lean startup, we want to leave you with a question to ponder. What assumptions are you making in your own work? And how could you test them more effectively?
What could you build? What could you measure? What could you learn from? Even if it's just a small experiment, we encourage you to really explore these ideas, see how these lean startup principles can help you reach your goals.
And remember, it's not a, one-size-fits-all solution. It's a mindset, a set of principles that can be adapted to, any industry, any situation.
So go out there, challenge the status quo, and start building your own lean startup, whatever that looks like for you.
Keep learning, keep adapting, and never stop innovating.
Until next time, keep diving deep.